I will turn it over to Dr. Carolyn Zachary, who will get us started with the CAEP update.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to my home office. I just wanted to share with you a little bit of what we're doing as we're looking forward to this next school year. And I do want to thank you, though, for the amazing job you all did pivoting in March and April to ensure that students were able to continue learning. And that was great. And I think we really need to focus on our students learning and their ability to move forward with their personal goals that have brought them to our adult education programs in the state. We have a small group of individuals from the field who have put together a common accessibility to technology intake survey. And the idea of this survey is really multi-pronged. The first and foremost reason for all of this is to have common questions so that we can have common data that then can be used, one, with our office sharing to the superintendent, two, within your regions to be able to share with your local state representatives, and three, so that you can also have an idea of what your students' needs are or what their abilities are to learn in a distance learning online environment. Now, this survey will be posted on the Cal Adult Ed website in a student tab. We're still working out those details, but we think that's where it's going to be. And what we're asking is that for your students that are your continuing students, where you're not getting any additional information from, you're not collecting any additional information from them, that you have teachers provide this link to their students in an online class and have them do this survey. The other way to be able to use this survey is going to be when you are enrolling new students, is to then either provide them the link for them to do it, or if you are one of those agencies that needs to provide this in a written format, I will tell you we're not at this point able to translate it, but to be able to provide it in a written format, it'll be in a PDF version that you can print out and have a student fill out. And then someone in the office, I realize that will take some time for a staff member to do, would be to input that information. It's not very lengthy. And I know that many of you already did this kind of a survey through those of you that are associated with school districts. Your school districts did this kind of a survey, a lot of them in March and April, to see what student accessibility was. But a lot of those questions varied throughout the state. And this will really allow us to, one, be a model as adult education, and to say, we've come up with these common questions that you should be asking, and here's our common data. And so I think that will be very beneficial to us as we're looking forward to how our students are going to be learning during this pandemic time period. Now, this group is also working on a second survey that's going to be for administrators, program administrators, very similar to what we had done in the spring, asking how you are planning to be delivering programs in this beginning part of the academic year. And again, that will be providing us that information so that we can share statewide and share with the superintendent and the chancellor's office, obviously, to so that we know how everyone is delivering instruction. All right, and with that, I'm turning it over to CASAS.
Thank you, Dr. Zachary. This is Janice Farah. I'm one of the program specialists in the Northern California area, and I'm a technology specialist, so that means I wear 2 hats at CASAS. And what I'm going to bring to you today are a few different points about kind of focusing on the guidance topics that Veronica mentioned earlier, looking at remote testing, giving you some feedback that we've gotten from the field about that, some of the new features that are coming in CASAS that will make assessments hopefully a little bit easier for your agencies, and also some new instructional materials that we think will be good for agencies to use with their students. Next slide, please. Oh, actually, if you could go back one, I'm still getting used to having the luxury of Veronica turning slides for me. Usually I'm doing it myself. The 3 points on here are just as a review that when the federal guidelines came out, they said that the states will be determining their own testing policies, but memos 20-3, -4, and -5 were very specific about ways that we can look to assess the students and come up with ways to, like memo 20-5 mentions, being able to put students onto the federal EFL charts without a pretest. And I'm going to talk about that. That's called the Reading Level Indicator, or RLI. However, the federal guidelines are still that we need to complete a pretest and a post-test as usual if you're going to get that measurable skills gain, MSG. And I'm going to use a whole lot of acronyms throughout this presentation. I apologize if you're new to adult ed or CASAS. If you want to drop me a line, I have a little acronyms chart that's very handy for when you're getting started. Next slide, please. So the state of California, CDE, has decided to implement remote testing. And there's 3 major rules. 1 is that the student can be identified. 2 is that the test is secure. And 3, that the proctor can administer the test in a secure way. Lots of documents about that. Next slide, please. The local assessment policy also needs to be updated by agencies. Appendix C has fabulous guidelines for talking about the curriculum, the testing, the actual definition of your distance learners, and how you plan to allocate and account for the instructional hours. So this is a reminder, agencies, to please, for the new year, new program year, update your local assessment policy. Next slide, please. Some of the feedback we've gotten from the field was really interesting. Agencies in Southern California that have done a lot of testing, they reported back to us that when the students are home and they're in an environment, oftentimes they're finding that the scores are actually up. And I wanted to pass that along as a point of encouragement to you. Also, they reported that no additional time was needed for a student to complete a survey, to complete an assessment when they're in a different environment than in a computer lab. Lots of possible places for CASAS to go digging in and finding statistics about that. But what we believe is that the added flexibility for your learners to be able to take an assessment, either scheduling wise or within their work schedule, that we believe that's going to be an essential part of your program going forward. And we encourage you to work with CASAS and to look at the ways that we can offer different kinds of remote tests. Next slide, please. Jay left this one in because it is a reminder to all of us that we're looking for ways to address equity concerns, to look at access to technology. Also, we acknowledge that the high staffing ratios when we're doing a 1-to-1 test versus 1-to-5 versus 1-to-30 or 25, excuse me, which is what many of us are used to. I encourage you to definitely fill out that statewide survey that Dr. Zachary mentioned earlier. The next slide, please. CASAS developed a couple of videos. There's a remote testing 1-to-1 demonstration. It's on YouTube that shows in really simple terms an example of a student and a teacher, a proctor and a student engaging in a remote assessment. And we think it's really helpful to both students and teachers to illustrate the process. We also came up with a technical video because as soon as we started doing remote testing, we got a lot of feedback about, it's hard to register a student's laptop device. So we came up with this way to do a quick 6-digit code that the teacher can send out either in advance or on the fly to the students. They type in the 6-digit code and boom, they're in the test. It's already preloaded and it knows who they are and it knows which test to give them. And that's been very helpful for agencies to proctor remotely. There's a mountain of documents in this blue CASAS.org under product overviews under remote testing. And there is also a special pile of documents for California agencies that go into details about COAP and CIT. Also a reminder for the new year, the agency remote testing agreement, the ARTA for California, you probably filled one out before. Well, it's a new year, so please, we were requesting that everyone would fill out a new copy of the ARTA for California. It's on the CASAS website, easy to find. And then when you finish completing it, after you hit submit, be sure to save a copy and send it to your CASAS program specialist as well as your CDE consultant. The next slide, please. All right, just as I mentioned earlier, a little preview, COAPs and CIT. Some of those assessments really fall well into the remote environment. It's an oral interview. CIT is perfect for doing it remotely. Some of the COAPs are performance-based with a, like, fill in a document. So we've had agencies use Google Forms and modify the COAP assessment slightly to be able to do that. CASAS has many suggestions. So if you're new to this part of EL Civics, we ask you to go ahead and give us a call, send us an email, and we'll get you connected to all the different guidelines and webinar recordings on that. Next slide, please. Oh, here's a couple pictures. Our agencies have been sending us pictures of what it's like to do creative things like parking lot testing. Here's one from Novi Adult Education in Michigan. They had students coming in their parking lot and they were sanitizing laptops and then giving them back to them. There's a YouTube video of that on there. You know, I could actually, I know I don't have 10 minutes, I probably have 4 more minutes, but I could spend 10 minutes just talking about the different ways that we see going forward being able to do remote testing. As lockdown changes, right? Let's say that you could get a proctor on site, but the students can't come on site yet. Maybe there's ways that we can do remote testing using the proctor on site in the computer lab, doing one-to-one on multiple computers at a time. We're actively working on that right now and trying to decide how that could be set up and what caveats we would want to warn you about and for maximizing success. Another way to do it, once the students are able to come on site, keeping them in an environment that's socially distanced, that's the kind of the second picture there on the bottom. You've got Jesse from tech support in a CASAS conference room. But if you had 6 students around a table like that, spread out, and you had one camera in the corner sitting on top of a file cabinet, maybe like we looked at some from, you know, on Amazon for $50, like a wide field Wi-Fi camera so that you can see a whole room. And the proctor wouldn't have to look at a whole bunch of little Zoom screens. They would be able to have one room full of students and watch them through this camera view in their browser, and then to be in a second room with students. And so maybe that would get you closer to the 1 to, like if you had 6 in each room, that would be a 1 to 12 ratio without pushing the difficulty level on the proctor. Also, we consistently try to update remote testing with the different charts. Next slide, please. This is what we call the approaches chart. I like to look across the top and say, what are the devices that the student has access to? Do they have a Chromebook, or do they only have a tablet or maybe a cell phone? We're looking at ways that we can possibly change e-tests so that we can deliver chunks of that via cell phone. The first one we're going to be piloting is ESL life and work listening over a cell phone, and we'll see how that goes and then try to expand it to other tests as well. Next slide, please. Okay, next 9 slides. I'm just going to go over briefly. There's a question in the chat I see. It says, does Windows 10 mean only Windows 10 or Windows 7 as well? Windows 10 is what we tested. If you want to check with tech support to see if they have any compatibility with Windows 7, I would suggest that. Marin Anton, she asks, do we have any recommendations on how to invite students to take a remote CASAS test or ideas for scheduling? Marin, that's a great question. And I just bounced that off of Richard Ackerman in development about scheduling. And that's definitely a topic for discussion. Let's see. Serena asks, please can you review the maximum number of students that CASAS can test in a remote setting at one time? Okay, if we go back one slide to that CASAS remote testing, thank you. This talks about 1-to-1, talks about 1 to 5. We've done EL Civics in a much higher density, 1 to 20, because of the different kind of a test it is. So to answer your question, Serena, it depends on which type of assessment you're doing. What's the maximum number that you can proctor remotely at one time? Let's see if there's another question. Best practices for remote testing. There's a frequently asked questions. Christina asked, is there a list of best practices for remote testing? I believe on the CASAS website under remote testing, there's a frequently asked questions, and there's a lot of that's fed largely by customer feedback. I would think that's probably a good place to peek for that. Also, we're planning a few different presentations with OTAN coming up in September, best practices shared by other agencies. So stay tuned for that. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I'm sort of transitioning to the second half of Jay's slide set here. And what I'm going to do is go through them very quickly, but it's just kind of he would say a paid advertisement for some of the trainings that are coming up. There's new features in TOPS Pro Enterprise 2021. It's coming up. That's on August 18th and September 1st. And all these trainings are available either through caadultedtraining.org. And then there's some specific ones that I'll mention later that Veronica so kindly is hosting through TAP, through CAEP. But the reading level indicator is one of the topics that we're going to be discussing. It's, can we go back just one slide? I apologize. Lots to look at here, but the idea is that the reading level indicator runs in a browser. It can go thus on a smartphone with no live proctor needed. It's free, and it puts the student into a Form 601R, which lets them go through a bunch of reading questions. This is aimed at EFL levels 3 and up, if you know what that means. This would be probably too difficult for a very beginning English language speaker to get through it. But it definitely puts a score into TOPS Pro Enterprise. Next slide, please. All right, is there anybody out there that has never ever even seen TOPS Pro Enterprise? Just as a curiosity. Well, this is a couple of screenshots from inside of what we call it TE, or TOPS Pro Enterprise. And this is the way that, did we lose a slide? Can I have the next slide, please? I apologize. Nope, back to. One more. Did we have the one with the list of students? Can you back one more, please? Yeah, this is the one I'm looking for, actually. So what we have is a list, we call it a student listers. So Grace and Karen, hang on, here we go. This is a list of student data that we call the student demographics lister. And to initiate a reading level indicator exam, the proctor or the teacher would click on that student name where the little red arrow is, and then you go up to the top right corner and you click send test invitation. Okay, next slide, please. And then you can select if you want it to go by text or by email or by both. And then it would send a text to the, I'm looking at my cell phone right now, you can't see me talking, but you send a text to the student and they would click on it and would put them into it. And after they completed it and they submit it, the results show up in TE under the test results lister. Next slide, please. Okay, another new feature in TE, and we're going to be talking about this during the presentations coming up. We're going to be looking at the data submission wizard. Whoops, did my screen go blank, or does everybody's screen go blank? Can we go back one? Yeah, the quarterly data submission wizard. For both CAEP and WIOA agencies, the ability to submit your quarterly data is going to be a lot easier in 2021 program year. No longer will you need to send individual PDF copies to CASAS via email. You're going to go into a wizard, click, 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 go through, and it will be sent directly to Nicole Jordan and the team at CASAS that processes all that information. So yippee, and thank you if any of our pilot agencies are online that were helping us with that. We're sufficiently happy that it's going to work fine for the field going forward. Next slide, please. Here's another goodie. If anybody out there have new teachers or administrators, or maybe even someone new in the consortium that would be able to, that would benefit from having a toolkit. Margaret Teskey worked very hard on this. I think she's online. Thank you, Margaret, for putting this together. It has more goodies. I think everyone who's experienced should read this too, because it has all the updated context for CDE and CASAS for the new program year, talks about our brand new training modules, talks about COAPs, record keeping, reports. You can download it from this link and share it with your boss and share it with your coworkers, because it's quite a gem. Good job on that, Margaret. Next slide, please. CASAS also engages with, when the field asks us for questions about instruction and assessment, it's almost like, do we have a crystal ball? Can we predict how our students are going to do on these GED and HiSET tests? And what we did is we did a bunch of statistical data and some number crunching, and we came up with some trends. And now in the individual skills profile report, there's a likelihood of passing for HiSET and GED that'll come up for each of the students that you run that report on. That we hope will be very helpful for you. And that's part of one of the presentations through TAP. It's going to be called Reports with TE on September the 9th. So be sure to sign up for that as well. Let's see, next slide, please. Accommodations. We have, again, instruction and assessment, additional support for students, and specifically the visual impairment and blind students. We came up with all different kinds of tools, booklets that will address that group of learners, hopefully be able to include them in adult education, learning, and assessment. And last slide, please. All right, everybody say this along with me. It's the I3 reports. It's the Immigrant Integration Indicators. Immigrant Integration Indicators, the I3 reports. What we did is we looked at ways that the COAPs could map into results with students. I'm still learning how to describe this, but the way that it works is we're gonna have the CAEP summary is gonna have new columns that will mark which students have those performances. As I understand it, that the COAPs are now being extended to CAEP-funded agencies as well as WIOA. There's a wealth of instructional material there about digital literacy and employment that would also be covered in the reports using TE on September the 9th. I think that the final adjustments to the reports will be coming. The one that you see on the screen, you should have in a couple of weeks, and then the CAEP summary reports will probably be Q2. And that's all I've prepared. I guess it's time to ask, are there any questions? You can type in the chat or raise your hand.
Janice, you might want to go back a couple of questions. Margot Hoffman has one. Scrolling there. Margot asks, is there a gathered list of ideas of people who have been doing alternative methods like parking lots? Gathered list. Yes, actually, there's a group within CASAS, and that was the one slide I wanted to add. In the social media and newsroom, we've been collecting success stories, and we have one person who's gathering and grouping them together. I think probably one of the best ways to hook up with success stories in the short term is to attend the network meetings that are sponsored by the program specialists every month. It's a slide deck that the CDE has approved, but it's a chance to collaborate with your fellow data managers and administrators and talk about what's working in your region. I think we all know that with COVID that there's a big difference between what we can do in rural California versus suburban versus urban areas. And sometimes being part of those network meetings is a chance to find out a lot more about ways that people have been doing it. Definitely the parking lot testing, Margot, there's a video of that on our website. It's Novi, N-O-V-I in Michigan. And it was very detailed about what additional Wi-Fi hardware they had to purchase and different steps they went through. So I would suggest to start with that. And if you need more information, linking up with your networks, your program specialist in the network meetings is a great way to do it. Okay. Recording of the webinar, I'm going to leave that to you. Let's see. Will CASAS be exploring mass remote CASAS testing? If so, when might that be coming down the line? Serena, I don't have an answer for that. Currently, the CASAS tests are approved to be used in an environment where the Octave has specified proctoring in groups. So that would be something I can pass along the question to my management and see where they land on that. It's not something that we can approve unilaterally. Maybe Dr. Zachary, do you have any comments? I'm hogging the microphone here, I apologize. But updated information on the impact of limited testing in terms of WIOA funding, that's definitely not my question. Beth asks, will the method of testing need to be consistent with a valid pre and post CAEP? I can talk. For example, if you test one-to-one remotely for the pre-test, is that what you would need to do for the post-test? No, absolutely not. We're hoping that we can all get back to school sooner rather than later. So if you do a remote pre-test and the post-test is face-to-face, there's no problem with that. The only requirement, Beth, is that the pre and the post are in the same modality. Ooh, 1 minute plug also. If any of you have never heard of proxying, proxying is the ability to take a test that was issued in the prior program year and copy it forward into the new program year. This is a gift, okay? It usually only goes back to May in order to enable summer schools to do what they have to do. This year, CASAS and CDE agreed that we will allow proxying of tests that were performed back to January 1st. It's January 1st of 2020, and proxy those into the current program year. So all those tests would have an immediate date stamp of July the 1st, beginning of the program year. There's instructions for it everywhere. You could call tech support, they could send it. You can go on CASAS.org and search for it. You can talk to Laurel in tech support. He wrote the documentation. Yeah, Karen, I hear that. Hallelujah on the proxy date. It's a function of TE. There's a wizard. It's really, I mean, it's not hard to use. You just go through the questions and it allows you to set it up and you hit submit and it churns away and copies the test into the new program year. Good question. Thank you for that. We're hoping that that's going to allow agencies for continuing students to avoid having to do another pre-test, that they can use the test that was done earlier in the prior program year into this one. Anything else? All right, Veronica, I think that's it for me.
Thank you, Janice. I'm not sure if I heard you answer Chris's question about putting Chromebooks into kiosk mode. Did you address that one?
You're right. You know, it's so hard to talk and scroll in the chat at the same time. How would I get information on putting Chromebooks into kiosk mode? What resources are there for that? Can it be done remotely? Okay, I'm going to put on my nerd hat. I don't know that you can do it remotely. I do believe that we have lots of resources. If you go to the CASAS website and you click on remote testing, or if you just go up into the top search bar and you type, thank God it's such an odd word, kiosk mode, you will find any of the documents, that remote testing guidelines that explain it. There are several people in tech support that have personally gone through all the steps to try kiosk mode on their Chromebooks at CASAS to verify that the results are working. Margaret's got a link there. Thank you. And Marin asks, so students can test on Chromebooks? That's good news. Good. It's always been the case live and in person that a Chromebook could be used because an agency can do that kiosk mode. I know I've been at agency sites when you were doing testing and they would roll out the cart full of Chromebooks and it was already pre-configured and they'd pass them out and they would do the pre-test on the Chromebooks. A little bit weirder when it's a student device, and that's why the question came up from Chris. Hopefully I didn't go too fast. If anyone has a question, you can always shoot it to me privately. Just put my email address.
All right, thank you, Janice, so much for that presentation. And thank you to all of the attendees of this meeting for asking those questions. I'm sure if you were thinking about it, others were too, and I'm sure that they appreciate all of the information that has been provided thus far. So the current slide that we have, and if any questions do arise, definitely feel free to type them in the chat and we will address them as we're moving along. But the slide, the graphic, excuse me, that's on the presentation at this moment is the results, part of the results of the topics poll that we had facilitated prior to our planning of the regional network meetings. And so for this one, the most important area of focus for adult education practitioners at this time was definitely adult education reopening for 2020 and 21. And of this topic, the three subtopics were, of course, as we were just talking, remote testing, as well as registration and enrollment, and then also instruction. Those were kind of the top areas that were brought to, that were scored as areas of importance. And so now we have a few more minutes in this section of our regional network meeting. And so I wanted to open the floor to anyone who wanted to kind of discuss either their plans for reopening. So if you all have any plans at this time, or if you'd like to discuss some of the barriers that you have overcome or some of the barriers that are still in place, maybe others who are on the call have ideas on how to overcome those barriers. So we're kind of opening it up for everyone at this time. And while you all are thinking about that, or deciding if you want to come live, we do have a poll that we would like to share with everyone and kind of get some immediate feedback on a couple of things that we are exploring and thinking about and will address during today's regional network meeting. So I'm going to open up our poll, and it's just 3 questions. And so on your screen at this time, you should see a poll that's titled Regional Network Meeting. And within this poll, there are 3 questions. The first one is, does your agency have a solid plan for reopening with distance learning for the fall? The second question is, has your adult education program been included in any K-12 device distributions? So for example, computers, hotspots, or tablets. And then, are you prepared with professional development on strategies and resources for remote teaching and learning for the fall? And so we have about 25% who have answered now. Everyone's answering at this time. So we'll definitely take a couple more minutes to complete this. We want to get as much information as possible. And we're at 50% now. And so those of you, right now we're showing, and I'll show the results as soon as we close the poll, but right now we're showing that about 88% of everyone who have participated in this poll, they say that they do have a solid plan for reopening with distance learning for the fall. So if I can just have maybe one person share what that plan looks like. We do have 5 people, 11%, who are saying they do not have a solid plan as of right now. So maybe some of the ideas that you all have put together could be useful for someone who does not have any solid plans for the fall. And we're at about 64% of our participants who have answered this poll. And I'm going to pop over into the chat to see if anyone's sharing in there. Okay, thank you, Connie. Connie says that she would like the answer choice. She would have liked the answer choice for the third question, I believe, for getting there. For an answer for the plan. Okay, we have some people who are saying that they agree with that.
This Serena Eichelberger with Monterey Adult School. In terms of your first question, we are opening classes next Monday. We provided targeted professional development for the last couple of weeks to be able to support our teachers with the distance learning platform. From last year to this year, we actually centralized the ones that we would be using. Unfortunately, our students don't have access to district emails at this time, so we are not using Google Classroom, but we would if we had access to that. So we're using Padlet for our ESL department and Google Sites for our ASC departments, and CTE and Parent Ed are using Padlet as well. So basically just looking at, we did synchronous versus asynchronous learning and did a lot of work on how to still incorporate like culturally relevant pedagogy and scaffolding and differentiation into synchronous learning environments. So we have synchronous learning environments daily, including like, and then asynchronous on a daily basis. And we had a plan for some in-person testing and really small environments, but that actually was put on hold just due to our current county numbers. So we're exploring different ways of being able to support the students with access to technology, and then our ability to do the pre-testing, since we, like, a fifth of our funding is tied to our WIOA payment points. So we have, we're exploring the idea of using the proxy exams for the returning students. For new students, we met with our local consortiums and the idea of the drive-in type of registration process. And then we also thought about, I was able to secure 120 free laptops for our ESL students and some Chromebooks. So we're thinking about when we distribute the technology that maybe they sit in their cars and do the tests there. And then we have also at this point, since we can't do any pre-tests, we're doing the registration forms in a Google form online or have hard copies outside of the building with a secure Dropbox. And at this point, anyone and everyone can enroll. We're just not, we haven't figured out the CASAS pre-test part of it yet. We piloted the EL Civics last year remotely, and that went well. So we'll be doing that again. And we are currently focusing on culture building and digital literacy for our first units, and probably be units that we continue throughout the year.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Serena, for sharing what your what the plan looks like at your school, at your agency. Definitely appreciate that feedback. And I see Karen had typed in the chat that their plan depends on students returning, and that's requiring a lot of student outreach, and that they are currently recruiting by making phone calls to former students. Do anyone else on the line have any other methods that they are currently using to facilitate outreach to students, since this is maybe a tougher time for outreach?
In Santa Rosa Junior College, we're actually using the Remind system, and we're also using our Facebook platform. We've been also partnering with our elementary and secondary school districts. We actually have been creating the text messages to go out to parenting groups, and sent a message to one of our high school partners and received 60 registrations for one of our computer classes in less than 24 hours. So right now we're up about 150% in enrollment from last year, just by using Remind to our former students and our text messaging system through our partner school district agencies.
Thank you so much for sharing, Nancy. Those are all great methods that you all are using. And I see the chat is definitely contributing to the conversation about different methods that are being used to conduct outreach for students. So as you can see, I posted the poll results. So about 86% has a solid plan for reopening. So that's great. And we have about 14% that is not at this time. So the hope is that as we're continuing this conversation, you know, you're able to, I guess, formulate ideas that maybe you can take back to your agencies if that's what the problem is, or, you know, continue to seek guidance on formulating those reopening plans. And then the second question is about the distribution of devices. So in the K-12 setting. And so about 31% has been included in that, and 69% has not been included in that. And that's kind of what we saw on Monday as well, that not a lot of our adult education agencies were included in that distribution of devices. And then the third is, are you prepared with professional development? About 80% says yes and 20% says no. So I will turn it over to OTAN, which is Penny Pearson and Netta Anasari, who will get us started with their section on technology and distance learning.
Thank you, Veronica, and welcome everyone. And I'll let my colleague Netta say hello as well.
Hey, everyone.
We have a few slides here. First and foremost, the slide that we have here, and since Veronica had posted this in the chat, when you open that slide deck up and put it in presentation mode, those links will become hot for you, so you can go to those particular pages. I did want to be able to kind of show you what they are. If Veronica will allow me to share my screen, I will kind of go out to those pages to give you a little better overview of what they look like, if that's okay.
Yes, you have access, Penny.
Okay, so why am I not able to share here? Interesting. Hold on, wait. Let's see what happens. Yes, so here we go. I won't share computer sound. Okay. So you should be seeing the OTAN website. This is pretty straightforward. If you haven't been here before, the website address is simply otan.us. And we have lots of information and resources here, but primarily I want to focus on our ability to help you with technology needs, training, resources, strategies, methodologies, all kinds of things in that order. First and foremost, probably the most appropriate for right now is our page on COVID-19 field support. There's a button here on the right side of the page colored orange that is our COVID-19 field support page. And basically this provides you with a listing of resources and support from several of the state leadership projects, which, you know, you're more than welcome to come in here and poke around. At the top of the page here, as I scroll down, you'll see we have resources from OTAN, CalPro, CASAS, as well as the CD Adult Education Office, CAEP, and then we have some other resources toward the bottom of the page for low and free and low cost internet and devices for students. We've had a lot of folks asking about how can my learners who have no access get access. So our project specialist, Anthony Burek, and other staff members have been kind of curating these resources for everyone. And then we also have information for students in terms of, you know, we've also received reports about some of the less savory things that go on regarding the pandemic, and then the resources, of course, for more information from the Centers for Disease Control, World Health Organization, as well as from California itself. So I'm going to pop back up to the top of the page here real quickly, and you'll see under the OTAN section, there are resources here that I believe can really help you and your organizations move forward to find those resources and materials that can help you with your remote teaching and learning efforts. So there's one item here I'll show you that's actually second on this list. It's from what we call the Appmazing Volunteers. There's a long story behind this name that I don't need to go into, but this is from our Corona Norco, one of our member Digital Leadership Academy members had put together a team, and they called it I Can Go the Distance. And this is very creative and a lovely way to kind of give a I'll say, a full course on doing distance at your school sites. So this is how they set this up, where they did it by agency. You'll see here, this is on citizenship. And they had, appetizers or starters and a first course and a second course and a dessert. All of the pages are designed this way to help agencies and teachers have a means to look for ways that they can engage and incorporate technology and distance and remote learning in their classes. So this one is on ESL. As you can see, they're all formatted in the same way. And here's another one, just as the first page. I should have started here. But this is basically, a really nice way to get a big overarching macro view of ways that your different program areas might be able to move through and look at ways that incorporate different forms of distance and remote teaching and learning. So again, I'm going through the ESL, I'm going through citizenship, and all of these links are live, so it can take you to these resources and tools so you can learn more about them. So that's kind of the menu. And again, this was off of the OTAN COVID-19 field support page, and that's from I Can Go the Distance. The second area I want you to be aware of, because I think this for administrators is a really nice place to start looking at what's been happening about the COVID pandemic. How have adult education agencies responded? And this is from World Ed, and it's a report, a very recent report called Ready, Set, Go, Steps to Rapidly Start Distance Instruction. So this is a PDF file, and it is meant to be just that. It is a quick way to look at some planning and some resources to help you get started on implementing a solid distance and remote teaching plan. As I scroll down the page here, you'll see these major bulleted items of making a communication plan, make a list of your program's technology resources, and then determine what your learners have. And sometimes that's the hardest part because we don't always know what our learners have. So then look at helping your learners access free or reduced cost internet and data plans. So all of these things, again, this is a relatively short document, but as I scroll, you can see here, number 5, get training for staff. Number 6, set up a remote support system, and then put everything all in one spot. So these are just ways that you can look at providing resources for not only your teachers, but planning your distance program and then also providing resources for your learners to be able to participate. So those are items at the top of this list. And the one I've kind of neglected at the moment is this OTAN resource guide. This is one that I think is one of the premier pieces of information that OTAN has been able to put together. As I open this up, you'll see that it is a Google Doc, and this is a curated listing of materials, resources, and strategies, and it's listed by topic and resource. And if we have OTAN resources that we have provided specifically on that topic, the links are here in this third column. So we have, on the left side, you have a nice table of contents that allow you to navigate the page. Because again, once you look at maybe those menus or you look at that Ready, Set, Go document, you may decide, okay, here's how I can move forward in ways that will help my program improve and provide more resources and ability to reach more learners in my program. So when we talk about things like, communications, I can just jump to communications by clicking in the table of contents here at the left, and it will give me a lot of different types of communication tools. So some of you have already spoken about Remind and WhatsApp. So those are great options, but there's others that might be worthwhile exploring. And in the third column, you'll see there that we have a couple of resources, a very short video on using Remind, and another one a little longer on using Google Voice. And again, these are all live links, so they'll take you right to it. If you're interested in learning more about web conferencing tools, as I scroll down the page here, you'll see that we have lots of different tools. Most of us know about Zoom. Maybe you haven't used Skype. Maybe you haven't used free conference call.com. But in that second cell on this table, you can see that we've got lots of links to YouTube videos and other resources to help you and your teachers learn how to use those tools a little bit easier. All of these items, as I scroll down the page, here's more about using video, are available for anyone to go to and look at, and then you can do what you need to do to see how they might incorporate into your programs. So again, we have lots on using videos of creation tools, video for assessment, making different video recordings. And in these days, we're doing more and more of that because, as you've mentioned, not all of us can get online at the same time, but a teacher can certainly record a short lecture, post it perhaps within their class, their online class, and then learners have access to it 24/7. There's a whole section on different simple activities, on creating flashcards or study guides or making a presentation, creating worksheets or infographics. And again, the format here is on the left-hand side is the name of the tool, and on the far right-hand side is OTAN supports and other resources that we might have done. We also have a whole section on assessment. Now, Janice did a very nice job of talking about how CASAS is allowing for a remote assessment for CASAS testing. But that's not the only way to do assessment. There's lots of different tools that can help you with that. And it may not be exactly as formal as what CASAS is doing, but it is a great way to understand your learning through your learners, providing different assessment tools. And there's also exit tickets, and this is something a lot more adult ed schools are using to help teachers understand how well did my lesson go today. And it can be used both in a face-to-face environment or whether they are online. As I go through these again, this is a long list, but it does provide you with some great resources about using these tools. So they're also broken out by resources for ESL. So if I click again, I'm going to the table of contents on the left-hand side of the screen, and you'll see a whole listing of different resources for ESL. And the same thing for our other program areas of adult basic education, secondary, and CTE. Again, we provided links and other materials that might help you in getting to where you need to go, wherever you are in your distance teaching and or remote teaching situation. So those are a curated list. So this is the OTAN resource guide. And if you remember, I was on the OTAN COVID field support page. It's right here at the very top, so you can get to it very quickly. The next item I want to show you is OTAN's efforts to support the field for webinar resources. Now, I'm going to step back from this because this is a big one, because we did a lot of work in the last 3 months, and I believe I might not have my stats perfectly correct here, but we did approximately about 200 webinars between March and the end of the fiscal year at the end of June, and we registered over 17,000 people in those webinars. And that's not all we did, though. And I'm going to pause for a second here because I've been talking for a very long time. And I'm going to stop the share so I can turn it over to my colleague, Netta Anasari, because her work that she's been doing with teaching with technology, I would like her to explain what that is and how it works, because I think that's another piece that OTAN has provided for a long time that is beyond our work with the OTAN field support. So I'm going to stop sharing. I hope if I can find the button. And Netta, are you ready to pop in on this one? Maybe.
Sure.
There she is.
Yeah, here I am. So I'll ask Veronica to bring back the slides for us, please. And I won't go to live on our website, but our Teaching with Technology tool is under, let's see, there it is. Okay. It's under, as far as our tabs, so you visit otan.us and you go into resources and you choose the technology, Teaching with Technology tool. This tool provides you resources that are specific to your program area. So if you're looking for specific resources and tools for your ABE students, you can find specific tools and resources. Right now, our team that's developing the resources on the Teaching with Technology tool is aligning the standards with the College and Career Readiness standards and the English language proficiency standards. So there's a tremendous amount of work that is done to update these entries and to make sure that the resources are current and valuable for you to use and incorporate in your distance and blended classrooms. So that's a little bit about our technology, our teaching with technology resources. Our curriculum offers page offers a variety of different options as well for teachers and students. Still under the tab, the resources tab, you filter through and go into curriculum offers. You'll find a couple of resources that help your teachers, but then a longer list of resources for your students. We're continuously adding resources onto the curriculum offers page. But to highlight a couple, CK12 is a open educational resource that you might be able to find resources to assist your ASE population, probably specifically under the high school equivalency community. So you can find maybe GED contributed efforts and Flexbooks for CK12. So if you need additional resources to help that program area, you would definitely find them under CK12. There's the video library through Learn 360 and a couple of different resources on that page. So I strongly suggest that you take a look at those. Of course, we always ask you to become OTAN members because then you'll be the first to know when we have a list of upcoming webinars and other activities. And of course, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, you'll also be notified. And if you're not already following us on social media, please do, because we will also be entering all that information so that you're the first to know via social media as well. And I see some people have been using social media for registration, enrollment, and kind of to get the word out to students. So we are big fans of social media and how to utilize that for education. And I'll hand it back over to Penny.
Thanks, Detta. Veronica, can you go ahead and go to the next slide? Because this is going to the questions that the CAEP survey had talked about, and this is, you know, ranking how important technology and distance learning is for all of you. And there are some things that I want to just bring to your attention, and I'll probably post them in the chat so you're aware of them. I've already talked to you about EdTech Center or worlded.org and their Ready, Set, Go document. And then I'll post a couple of others from our partners. One of them, of course, is World Ed, and that's tips for distance learning. This is another document that can be useful, just providing some guidance and some resources. And it's more of a national view, but that can help you understand what's going on and how other people are responding. And along that same line, Pro-Literacy, our friends at Pro-Literacy, they have done another study that I think all of you would find very heartening, because I believe that adult education, whether it's in California or across the nation, we are very good at being able to respond quickly. And this particular study that I just posted in the chat pod is the COVID Rapid Response Report from the field. And it will give you some ideas about what other agencies are doing, not just California, but across the United States. And I think that is something that, because it's ranked so highly here in California, it's good to see what others are doing. Okay, the last item I'll post, and this is especially true for those of you that, you know, maybe in kind of the beginning stages of looking at and implementing a longer term practice of distance and remote teaching, and this is a handbook. Now, this handbook, again, has come from our partners at World Ed, and this is there's a whole handbook on what we call simply DL 101. And it walks an agency through a process of how do you build, maintain, and implement a good distance learning program. Now, for some of you are like, well, gosh, we're in the middle of all this. And yes, we are, but I'll bet you've probably done most, if not at least a portion of the steps that are given here as a way to implement a distance learning program at your agency. And I just kind of like to throw out to the field right now, how many of you would be willing to say, excuse me, I'm going to cough just a second. Sorry about that. I think I got a bug. My question to all of you that is currently in the meeting here, if you're willing to share, how did you or when did you start your distance learning program? And I'm saying not just about, oh, I started it in March, but you may have started earlier but realized in March, you had to shift into 5th gear. And what were some of your challenges and barriers that you might have experienced in doing that? Have anybody willing to share? This is when I need the Jeopardy music, right? No one in the chat? Do I get to call on folks? Christine? Yep. Access to technology, barriers, reliable internet, and childcare support. And that's another area we've seen a lot where many of our adult schools have been able to step in and help with some of those social services. We even have issues, of course, I'm sure some of you can speak to this, of, you know, you've got learners that they're having food security issues. They don't have enough food because both parents have lost a job and they don't have income to come in to help them, let alone, you know, try to be learning something new. Okay. Yep, busy with their kids at home, because now their kids are learning at home and then they're going to be learning at home. Plus they have to do perhaps working from home if they're working. Lots of barriers, lots of, you know, I'll say barriers, but I also have to say many of our adult learners are very tenacious and they're very persistent and they're dedicated to their learning. So I think that's where we as adult schools can really step in and step up to help them meet those goals. Okay, so I would like to go ahead and move to our next slide. Veronica, if you would. And this one has to do with, oops, sorry, back one. There we go. I didn't realize we were on it already. I apologize. So these are the 3 subtopics that were identified by the field. And again, when you download this particular presentation, we have put in a number of links that address these areas, especially digital literacy courses for teachers. I would recommend North Star. So they have some great curriculum as well as assessment for both teachers and learners to gain the digital literacy skills that they need. Additionally to North Star, if you haven't heard that Google has their Applied Digital Skills program, it's a virtual boot camp for both learners and teachers to gain digital literacy skills. And again, these links are in the PowerPoint presentation, so it will provide you with what OTAN presented, but then there are other resources there, including slide decks from our presenters and other handouts. And then there's also some pieces that we did with CalPro, our partners, on understanding digital equity, inclusion, and literacy. So we do have pieces about increasing equity in online learning and understanding what that digital equity looks like. Again, these links are in this slide. And there's other resources in terms of what OTAN provided on our OTAN website page. And I can show it, but when you go to that page that I was just showing you a moment ago, where at the field support page, there's a whole list of previous OTAN webinars. And you can look at that as they were posted, but at the very top of that list, there is an index that allows you to look at the index based upon program area, based on tool, based on digital literacy and other types of topics such as gamification. We have a whole section on Google. So these are all of those 200 webinars that OTAN did. They have been indexed by topic area and or tool. So again, you get to that by going to the OTAN COVID field support page. And at the top of the page there is a link to the OTAN previous webinar resources, and you can scroll and look at them by date, or you can select the link that says webinar index table, and it will get you to the index showing all of those different resources that are available. And it is important that, you know, these are resources anybody can get to, but understand too that OTAN will provide whatever we can in terms of support for the field. If you've got ideas or questions, or you're looking for a particular tool, if you just drop a note to support@otan.us, we will do our best to match you up with something that may work for you. It would be up to you to do your due diligence to make sure that it works for your program, your learners, your teachers, etc. But I think in general, I hope all of you would agree that, you know, OTAN really stepped in with the help of our partners and CDE of providing resources that will allow our teachers and our administrators to have what they need to turn so quickly on a dime to help our learners and to keep them in a learning program as much as reasonably possible during this pandemic. So I hope you'll spend a moment to go and explore. For those of you that are not OTAN members, as Netta mentioned earlier, I would strongly recommend you join us, and you can opt in to receive notifications about our upcoming webinars and receive our newsletters, etc. And with that, I'm going to just give it one last over to Netta to make sure I didn't forget anything we should be talking about, and then we can give it back to Veronica. But Netta?
Nope. No, we did not forget anything, and I put in support at otan.us as in the chat, and I think we're maybe running out of time for our section, so I'm going to go ahead and hand it back over to Veronica. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, and thank you, Penny and Netta, for such a great presentation, and thank you all for contributing to the conversation, even in the chat. If you have any other questions related to technology and distance learning that you would like to pose, definitely feel free to type them into the chat. Additionally, if you have any kind of sharing of practices or, you know, things that have worked out really well for your agency in supporting adult learners during this time, feel free to type that in the chat as well. We are going to move forward with the next section, which is the student support services section. Again, during our facilitation of, you know, really identifying the topics of importance for you all, student support services was ranked 3rd overall. However, it was kind of between ranking 1st, 2nd, and 3rd for most people, but in the overall data, it was ranked 3rd. And so of this topic, some of the main areas that were of importance were employment, as well as counseling and transition services, and mental health support. And so I want to turn it back over to you all to see, you know, to engage in conversation about how you all are supporting your adult learners at this time with student support services, and related to the 3 top areas that I just mentioned, or anything else that has been beneficial to you and your adult learners during this time. I'm not seeing anything in the chat now, or anyone's unmuting themselves, but I would definitely like to call on a couple of people to see if they would like to share. The first person is Usha. Usha, are you there? Would you like to share on how you have been supporting your adult learners during this time with student support services?
At CASE, our transition specialists have been integrated into the classroom. So they have been actually going into the classroom and providing support that if talking to students and finding out what kind of needs they had. And secondly, we also started creating a resource, which was throughout the consortium, and I know there are other members of our consortium here. They could chime in as well. So we also created a resource list for all of our students, and we shared that throughout the consortium. And that has been highly beneficial for our students, because it has kind of given us an idea of which community resources have been able to provide the type of need students have in terms of employment, or if they had food insecurities. And then I think you'd mentioned one more topic, didn't you, Veronica, that were like kind of priorities for students?
Yes, mental health support.
Mental health. So we tried to connect students to any of the agencies that were providing those resources here. Moreover, throughout the consortium now, we have something called a community connections group. So we have a list, a group of community programs that are community-based organizations that are working with us, and they meet monthly. So there's a meeting that is coordinated monthly among our community-based programs, and also adult ed partners. So we all meet together and talk about the services that we offer and also the services that are needed by our students. So it's kind of a reciprocal relationship, and it is hosted monthly. So through that, we've been able to provide services that our students have needed. Did I answer your question, Veronica?
Yes, thank you so much, Usha. Definitely very great information, especially the monthly meetings that are held amongst yourselves as well as other community partners in order to kind of provide that well-rounded approach in meeting adult learners' needs at this time. Definitely thank you so much. And calling on other attendees, Serena, would you like to share on how you have been supporting your students in the realm of student support services?
Sure. Yeah, we ended up shifting some of our classified support staff, including some of our office staff and our childcare staff. And so we basically made one person a tuck support person for students. And he would call students individually, and like there was just a Google form where students can sign students up if they, or teachers can sign students up if they needed additional support. And they were able to connect one-on-one to be able to access Burlington English or Google Meets or things like that. We also utilized applications that a lot of our students were already familiar with, like WhatsApp, and some teachers had already used Remind. We also made sure that we had, similar to what Usha was saying, resources available for our students, particularly our students who are facing homelessness due to the pandemic and kind of just shifts in income flow, and partnered with local organizations that are able, and our district with our homeless family liaison, in order to make sure that their basic needs were met, including, you know, some shelter and clothing and food. We've also partnered with different local nonprofits to make sure that there's food distribution going out. And for some of our students in our culinary program, they didn't actually have access to any food at home to be able to participate in the classes. So we created little packages of ingredients that they would normally be, you know, preparing as they get their ServSafe certification, and they would be able to take them home and get some food there. We've also did, let's see, Chromebook distribution for our high school diploma program, and we recently partnered with an organization who got MacBooks. They transferred from PCs to MacBooks, and so I just poked around and I was like, hey, what'd you guys do with those old laptops? And so those were wiped and they will be given out to our ESL students. Things that we are toying with, oh, and then also working with our local workforce development board and making sure that the, because in the Monterey Bay area, the hospitality industry has been severely impacted with the pandemic. And so we've really been making sure that the postings that are available and up there are getting out to our students, and really trying to make sure that we're partnering our students with organizations that can support with other barriers, including, you know, things that may offer free and reduced internet service. We connect them with our district's Park and Learn, which are parking areas that have free Wi-Fi connections. And then also with mental health services, so places where they can go to be able to get some free or reduced services to help kind of deal with the stress and anxiety that a lot of us are experiencing during the pandemic. And then this year, we are looking to explore ways in which we can offer that tech support more en masse. And the one-on-one support. So we are thinking about possibly broadcasting some lessons over an FM radio station, so that students who don't have internet can, like, well, one, come park on our campus and be able to use that, or the Park and Learns, but two, if they need a little bit more support with that in terms of how to get on, if they're in their cars, then possibly we can do FM radio in combination with like a big screen projector type of stuff. So we're just trying to be kind of innovative and creative in the ways. Oh, and I think the big thing is definitely allowing them to register, even though we aren't able to really pre-test a lot of students. So we're trying to access support in that way as well.
Thank you so much, Serena, for sharing. I don't know that I have heard of broadcasting lessons over FM radio. So that's definitely, for me at least, it's an innovative approach to being able to support students who do not have adequate access to technology and devices. So that's really great. Thank you so much for sharing all that you all are doing down in Monterey to support your adult learners. And I had Jamie who said she wanted to share. So definitely feel free to unmute yourself.
Hey everybody, thanks for the opportunity to just share out a little bit about what TAM Adult School is doing, and it's great to hear what other people are doing too, because it just gives me more ideas. I think one of, at the start of the shelter in place, we knew we needed to kind of put together a list of resources in one simple place, and which included just sort of how students, navigated to their classrooms online. And so what we found was to have teacher web pages was sort of the more simple way to do that. And then on each teacher web page, we would put the partnerships that we have with, there's several important partner agencies that we really rely on to coordinate services in the Marin community. One of those is Canal Alliance, which is a nonprofit that works in our community that serves the immigrant population, which is primarily who we serve in the adult school. So we work with them a lot, and they just have provided a tremendous amount of outreach. So we linked their resources to each teacher webpage, and then the teachers made sure that they discussed those resources and really talked about some of the available programs. And, at the time it was a little bit about census, but it was also about rental assistance. Until that got settled. And then it was also the pop-up food pantries that were happening locally and how to access them. It was also really helping parents connect to the services that their children were receiving at the schools. We found that there was a pretty big disconnect from what the parents were getting, because so many emails were going out, and many of our parents don't read emails, and really there were too many emails to keep track of. So we were helping parents navigate all that information. Sometimes parents would find their way to me, and I'd be able to help them get to the right person at a school. So there was just a lot of that. The other support service that we really had to focus on was just the tech. Like I said, a lot of our people didn't have emails and, didn't know how to access emails. But then once they had emails or they had access to, getting to class online, it was very difficult for them to do that. So we kind of worked through individually, which was a lot, how to help students navigate to online classes. A support services that we offered was really summer school this summer, which I really kind of felt was super important to offer. So we allowed people from all over outside of Marin County to join our high school diploma program and to enroll in ESL classes. And we continue just to check in and create a community among our students. And I think one of the things that I really appreciated, we have a bilingual college counselor that we work with closely, and he has been able to do a lot helping students transition, when they graduate to the community college, and not just to the one that he works at, but maybe to others that might have programming that better fits their, end goal. So that's been quite helpful. Trying to think of what else. And then making sure that we access the very small number of community funded organizations, Adopt a Family that helped with rental assistance and other support services in Marin County for especially undocumented folks who needed rent assistance or food financial assistance as well, but didn't necessarily get it from the federal government. So that's just a little bit about how we supported people.
Thank you so much, Jamie, for sharing. Those were a lot of great ideas and strategies that you are utilizing, especially leveraging partnerships with community-based organizations and other organizations that can supplement what may not be provided at the federal, state, and county level. So thank you so much for sharing. In the chat, I definitely wanted to know Jody Slider had put in our consortium work together using the Ideal Handbook on Distance Learning. It was a great way for our members to share strategies and ideas for effective distance learning delivery. Now, Jody, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I would definitely love if you could share a little bit more about the strategies and ideas that you all had come up with as a consortium. So that's, you know, both systems coming together to implement distance learning. You can either type it in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself, that would be great.
Sure, I'd be happy to share a little bit about what our consortium is doing on utilizing the Ideal Distance Learning or Distance Education and Blended Learning Handbook. We really needed some foundational information about implementing not just a pivot like we experienced in the spring and switch to what we can do to provide educational services to our students, but really to strategize what we could do as a region and individually to develop effective strategies and ideas. And the handbook is, and I really want to encourage you to take a look at it. Penny put it in the chat box, and it's a how-to guide. It tells you a lot about research that indicates how you can help your students engage in distance learning, how you develop a program that will encourage persistence. Persistence was one of our biggest challenges last spring. Yeah, we got the pivot going and we got the students enrolled, but a lot of times they didn't stick around, and we needed to understand what we were doing, what we could do differently to really address that. So we looked at what the handbook had to offer on ideas for encouraging persistence, what to put in your orientations when you're orientating students to a distance learning platform, what should be included, what's important about how you connect with students, as well as instruction. And then there's also a chapter in the handbook that is particularly for administrators in how to support your staff. And so we really kind of dove into this together with Penny and Nada's support. OTAN was amazing with giving us resources and ideas. And then finally, now we have a weekly office hours that we all just come together and say, okay, what's working for you, what's not working, and it's a way that we can share ideas and challenges and get ideas from one another on, you know, how we can get better at delivering distance learning. Hope that's helpful.
Thank you so much, Jody, for elaborating on that. That's a great way to collaborate across the consortium. Thank you all very much. We are at the end of our 90 minutes together. This has been a wonderful opportunity for us all to engage amongst each other on the different areas that are of importance to you. A lot of tips, tools, resources, strategies, etc. have been shared here. And as you all know, the CAEP Summit 2020 will take place on October 26th through 29th, and it will be on a virtual platform titled VFairs. Registration will open very soon, and it is at no cost to anyone. So all adult education practitioners can join us this year for the virtual summit. We do have our call for proposals open at this time. The registration deadline, or the submission deadline, excuse me, is on August 28th. So I definitely encourage you all to submit proposals if you feel comfortable presenting. I think this information should be shared with a broader audience. You all have a lot of very innovative and very effective practices that are working for you in this different climate that we are all in. The theme for this year's summit is supporting adult learners through unprecedented change. And so as you all know, this pivot has definitely been an unprecedented change for everyone involved, and we definitely like to share this information with everyone. So I encourage you, if you are thinking about it or you're kind of undecided, to definitely go ahead and submit a proposal and share this information. I'm sure there are a lot of people who can benefit. This presentation has been recorded and will be available on the California Adult Education website tomorrow. So I offer you the opportunity to come back and review it. If there are any strategies or tips or anything that you had heard but you may need to reference at a later time, or if you'd like to share this information with others who were unable to attend, definitely feel free to access this information at a later time. We will continue our regional network meetings with next Monday, August 17th, with the Central California region. So if you want to see what they are up to, definitely feel free to pop in. It'll be at 1:00 p.m. and you can register on our website. So that's all that I have for now. I didn't see any additional questions in the chat, but if ever you do have any questions, feel free to contact TAP or OTAN or CASAS for any questions that you may have that you were unable to ask at this time. So thank you all very much for your time and your participation this afternoon, and hope that you all have a great rest of the day. Oh, and before we go, thank you to our presenters. So thank you to OTAN, CASAS, WestEd, as well as the CAEP office for participating this afternoon. We couldn't have done it without you all. So thank you so much for sharing.